Well, hello and welcome back to my Love Machine podcast. Now, today I'm going to be talking to you about relational patterns. And this is all about repeating the same behaviors over and over again with new people that come into your life. And to help me discuss this, I've brought in an absolute expert on the subject. I've got John Kenny, who is known as the relationship guy. Welcome, John, to my podcast.
Good morning, James. How are you? Thank you very much for having me.
It is a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming. I am pretty good. I'm in a good mood. It's a nice, miserable day here, but let's make it brighter and more uplifted by talking about all the wonderful things we can do to help people who are perhaps struggling in their relationships. So, John, can you tell everyone about yourself and what you do, first of all?
Yeah, so as you said, I am the relationship guy and I'm a relationship coach. My original kind of trade was in counselling therapy. So I trained as a counsellor sort of 2004 time. And then I moved into coaching around 2012 when I realised that I knew a lot about myself, but my life still sucked, to be honest with you. And I met a coach and she was able to kind of point me in the right direction to change things for myself. So I've done lots of little things in between. I was a firefighter at the time when I trained to be a coach, and then started my own sort of coaching business and went completely out on my own. I was a therapist in the NHS for a little while. And then in 2016, I thought, I just really want to focus on the coaching. And then about 2 years ago, so 2018 or so, I started to really focus just on the relational side of things. Wrote a book, made a documentary, and it's been sort of going from there, really.
Wow. So what's your book about?
So my book is called The People Program. It's about overcoming your personal blocks to success. It's a coaching program I wrote many years ago. Didn't really do anything with it, and so I thought I'd turn it into a book. So the first half of the book is something about what we're going to talk about today. So it's my life story and how I learned to do relationships and the beliefs that I built up around relationships. And kind of really like looking at yourself is the second half of the book. It's the program. So it's to ask yourself the questions which can help you to overcome your own personal blocks to success.
That's very important. And your documentary, what's that about?
That's about the child parts of ourselves that we leave behind. So being a therapist originally, I did a lot of work on sort of attachment theory and how we learn to fit in to our environment as children. And it was very evident in a lot of the client work I was doing that people felt very uncomfortable with themselves or certain parts of themselves. And this book is about how we learn as children to fit into that environment that we grow up in and the certain parts of our child self that we leave behind. And then we don't accept those parts of ourselves as we grow up into adult life. And when those parts come out, they feel quite incongruent. And we reject them and we sort of beat ourselves up for having those parts. But actually, it's only because of the messages we received as kids that made us suppress those parts of ourselves in the first place. That's called Forget Me Not, the Child You Left Behind.
That sounds quite sad. I presume there's a happy ending to it, and happy outcome is the goal, isn't it? With that,
yeah. I mean, it talks about, again, it's talking about how you can bring that back. So it isn't it's about understanding why you might have put that aside in the first place. And again, it is a very sad thing for some people and a difficult thing for some people. But the documentary is to sort of say this is how it might be for you, but it doesn't necessarily always have to be this way. You can change this by looking at these things and putting things into practice to help you move forward.
I think that's particularly important.
Bring that part of your child self back.
This is what I teach people myself when it comes to dating. I teach them about being playful and being the child that you want to be, because everyone is still a child deep down. This is what I think happens. So I think what you're saying, people might suppress this and they have bad memories and bad experiences that haunt us as we grow up and we're told certain things. And I teach it in relation to flirting in particular, that people don't flirt, but they can because it's a skill that they're all born with. But we're told we shouldn't do inappropriate behaviors, particularly guys. And so are your clients mainly singles or couples or people in relationships?
Yeah, so mainly singles, mainly people that are looking to get into healthy relationships. So I focused a lot over the last couple of years on helping people that were in toxic and unhealthy relationships, because that's my kind of relationship story myself. So I know how difficult it is to keep choosing or attracting people or bringing people into your life that are not very healthy for you. So I was focusing a lot on helping people to manage their own space if they're in relationships already that are very toxic or unhealthy, or to understand their kind of what we're going to maybe touch on today is that relational pattern and why they keep attracting those into their lives. And then realize there were a lot of people out there that wanted to find a healthier relationship. So kind of shifted focus a little bit to help people to say, okay, if you want to break this pattern, or maybe if you spent a lot more of your time focusing on your work or your business, and now you've realized that you actually want someone to come in and complement your life, I'm helping people to do that.
And that's particularly important right now during these strange times, the pandemic. I've seen a lot of breakups happen, people that were in toxic relationships, and they decided enough is enough now. I want to get through this and find alternatives. So that's why I've been quite busy. I presume you've been busy as well with the same sort of thing. But I have to ask you the question, can you share your story then? What sort of toxic relationships did you have?
Yeah, so as a child, I didn't receive much time from my parents, much love and affection. They had a big bag of issues of their own, and they weren't able to kind of enable me to feel safe and secure within the relationships within my household. And then as I got older, I started to kind of repeat those patterns. So even from the age of sort of 13, 14, my first kind of relationship at school, she was quite abusive, manipulative and controlling. And then when I left home and my kind of first real relationship and moved in with a lady, she was quite abusive as well. Very insecure, would always play mind games, emotional games with me. And being sort of 19, 20 years of age, I had no idea how to manage that environment. But that was kind of indicative of the kind of person I would attract into my life, someone that was very needy, someone that was very insecure. And that led me to believe that I wasn't ever going to be good enough for anybody, which is how I felt as a child. And was used to the kind of, I wouldn't say my parents were abusive, but they were quite neglectful emotionally. So that's the kind of relationship I then went through time after time. So if I met someone that was in a good space, that was quite secure, I would do whatever I could to kind of ruin that relationship, because I didn't know how to be in something that was healthy. But then I would be very attracted to somebody that was quite destructive, or insecure, but would feed that need for me to self-destruct and self-sabotage at the same time.
Yeah, well, you've touched there upon attachment styles. For those that don't know, could you just explain quickly to my listeners what that is, how they work?
So it's a theory from a guy called John Bowlby. It's a kind of psychodynamic related theory around counselling, but it's how we learn to attach as children in our relationships. So if you have a loving, nurturing, caring, supportive upbringing, you generally have a secure attachment, so that you are confident in yourself, you're confident about relationships, and you only allow yourself to be involved with people generally that are secure as well. So you usually find a happy and healthy relationship as you grow up. If you've had a relationship or an environment when you grow up that makes you feel insecure, you can have either an avoidant attachment, which was my type of attachment. So I didn't know how to be close to people. So whenever I would meet somebody, I would want to run away if I got too close to them, or I would actually choose people that I couldn't be close to. It meant I could avoid that deeper level of connection, which my brain's not very comfortable with. You have an anxious attachment. So generally, if you had a child perhaps that would scream a lot, and get their own needs met that way, they go into an anxious state when they're not getting their needs met in a relationship style. Say they perhaps met someone like me who was an avoidant, we'd get together and we'd get on very well, because at the beginning I would give them all the secure love and attention that they needed, because at the beginning of a relationship I was always very 100% full on. Then I would become, barriers would go up, my avoidance style would kick in, they would then become very anxious and they would start to chase me, because they would feel very insecure because I would have backed off. And they would then create, shout, scream, whatever it is, but would have a real deep need for me to show them love and affection. And then you have the fourth type, which is called an anxious avoidant. They're generally pretty messed up. And they've got a lot of problems because they've got the worst of it, really. They've got both. So on the one hand, they want to love and affection, so they have this anxiety around not being cared for, but on the other hand, they don't really know how to deal with affection anyway. So they avoid it when it's there, and they keep going around in, like all of these people with an insecure type of attachment, they keep going around in a similar type of circles until they've actually worked on themselves and figured out what that attachment is.
Whenever I hear this, it just makes me appreciate how lucky I was to be brought up in a very secure relationship with my parents. Were very strong, very well. My mum was more loving than my dad. My dad was more verbal, but in a good way. Different ways of expressing how they. And it makes me think how lucky I am, and I want to pass this on to my own kids as time goes on. Even though it's hard to do that, what you teach your kids can affect you for the rest of your life. And I touch upon this sometimes in my podcast, and it's an important thing because I have many anxious clients, many avoidant clients, many of all those things that you've told me. And they're the ones that come to us, aren't they? Because they need help.
Yes.
What made you realize then, when you went through this, that enough was enough and you didn't want to live this way and self-sabotage anymore?
So it took me a while to actually put the changes in place, but I made a decision. My relationship before I met my wife had just finished, and I was back in that same space where I didn't feel like I was enough, that nothing I would ever do would be good enough for her. And I sat on the sofa, and then my cat got on my lap, and I said to my cat, I said, "Cat, I'm not doing this again. This is the last time. I need to do something differently next time, because I'm fed up with this cycle." And because I'd already been in counselling and a bit of personal development up until that point, I knew that there was something that I was doing that was making this happen, but I couldn't quite pinpoint what it was that I was doing. And then I started to embark on that kind of real self-learning, self-understanding journey. So, okay, what is it about me that enables this to keep happening? And over the last, that was probably about 7 or 8 years ago. So over that period, I've really looked at myself, really delved into this relational side of things. Probably firstly, it was because of me. I needed to understand me. And then secondly, I recognized how common it was with everybody else. And that's why I started to specialize in that area.
Has your cat held you accountable for this?
We have a very secure relationship.
That's good. Exactly. People can show affection to their cats, can't they? And they treat animals differently than with humans.
Well, I grew up with cats in the house, so they were there. They were always on my lap. They were purring. They wanted fuss. I know they were, really, they just wanted food and stuff like that. But they were there to show me the affection that I didn't have as a child. So yeah, I've always had cats because of that reason. I think it's because I have an affinity to kind of, they're also quite avoidant cats. They're very choosy about when they want fuss and when they don't. And as an avoidant person, they're very suitable. No, not like a dog. A dog is a very dependable, wants lots of fuss, wants to be around you all the time. I've avoided that because of that kind of level of connection, even with an animal. But cats are kind of avoidant type personalities, so they're great for me.
I've never really thought of it before, but you're absolutely right. That is how they are. I suppose dogs are more secure, aren't they? They just love you regardless of who you are, warts and all, faults and all. And maybe that's why dogs are so happy with people. In fact, funny enough, when I ask people what they have to offer a partner, they always tell me things like they're loyal, they're funny, they're playful, which are just dog qualities as a puppy. But enough about that. So you made the decisions to make these changes, and I guess you're probably still working on this because nothing ever gets resolved completely, does it? It's all an ongoing process. But
it's all
So what have you done exactly? What do you teach people now to avoid the same mistakes? Avoid is the wrong word. To not do the same things that you did.
To be an avoidant.
Yeah.
It's about understanding your space. Where do you come from? What kind of relational patterns have you evolved because of the ones that you had when you were a child? What kind of belief systems are you holding on to around yourself, relationships? Are you expecting certain things from relationships, so therefore that's all you're looking for? And it's really delving into that individual, what that individual's doing about their relationships that makes them choose the wrong type of relationship for themselves each time, and maybe picking out what are the good parts that you've also experienced, so they recognize the things that they really want from somebody, and what they're not going to accept for themselves anymore as they move forward. And then we kind of work to do different sort of coaching processes to help them to do that.
When someone goes through this journey, if their partner is supportive in this, or let's say they've got a partner, because not everybody has. If you've got someone that wants to work on themselves and be a better partner, make a deeper connection, what advice would you give somebody to try and support somebody who maybe has these sort of relational issues?
Again, I think it's important that there's communication. I think that's the most important thing in a relationship anyway, is that you communicate to each other how you feel about these certain things. Again, if you're in a relationship, you may have chosen that relationship for the wrong reasons anyway. So the changes that you might want to put into place, the partner may not be supportive because they've chosen you because of who you are. So if you do have an insecure attachment, they probably want you to keep it, because that serves their attachment style. But if they're not, if they are secure and they are able to help you in that, I think to be able to help someone in this situation is, again, it's what do they need you to do? How can you make them feel secure so they can move away from their anxious or avoidant or kind of self-sabotaging, lack of being able to connect to someone kind of state, and encourage them to feel safe with you. So if you're doing certain things which you know will trigger their issues, it's important that you're aware of that and that you do your best not to set those triggers off. And then you'll be able to help that person to manage their own issues and work through their issues in a secure and safe space. Because most of this is about fear of connection or not knowing how to connect properly to somebody else, because it brings up difficult emotions within you, the way that your brain is processing this information. So if you can help them to manage that space, then you'll be able to help them through the problems that they've got. And if you're not prepared to do that, then there must be something about you that's chosen to be with them because of your own stuff as well.
It can be frustrating for somebody to have to deal with this day in, day out. If you've got a very secure attachment style and someone that you're dating is very avoidant or anxious, constantly reassuring them, making sure that you're being careful what you say, can be very, very painful and frustrating. So how would you get through that? Is it, because it's an ongoing thing and it takes a lot of work from both sides. Communication absolutely is the secret. I agree with you there. But what would you do? Because I see plenty of good relationships fold and close down because they just had enough. They think, well, enough. I'm enough trying to please you, enough trying to persuade you that I'm being faithful, enough of this. How would you handle these people? What would you advise them to do?
I think there's sometimes you just can't do anything. You know, it's you need to look after yourself, you know, which is the key to being happy, is to make sure that you're in a really good space. And if this person is continuously doing things which take you into a bad space and they're not prepared to do any changing themselves, I mean, that's the key. You know, if you are there to support someone, you're there to support someone, you're not there to change them. They need to change themselves. So if they're prepared to do the work that they need to do on themselves to get themselves into a better space, then you can support them in that. But you're not responsible for them. You're not there to make sure that they're okay all of the time, because that's far too draining. And again, I wouldn't suggest you're probably in a healthy space yourself if you think you need to do that. But if the other person's taking responsibility for how they are, so maybe getting some coaching around that to work on their own issues and because they want to move forward, then you can help them by supporting them in their changing and helping them to feel better. But it isn't your responsibility to keep reassuring them, to keep making them feel better, because if you keep doing that, they don't have a reason to change because you're buying into their cycle. So it's really important that although you might trigger them at times by not buying into their cycle, you can't buy into their cycle all of the time, because then they will just keep going around in circles and you'll keep going around in circles. And then, like you said just now, they'll get frustrated, it'll be too much, it's really draining, and you just don't really want to be there anymore. And you don't have to be there. Again, I would suggest that if you do keep trying to hang on in there, that you probably haven't got a massively secure attachment. There's something about your relational style that's making you stay with someone that's really hard work as well. Because relationships can be really easy. They don't have to be difficult. But again, that's part of maybe your relational belief system, that relationships are really difficult and they're always bringing up problems. So, to check in with yourself at the same time. Am I doing this because I feel like I need to? Is it fulfilling something in me that keeps me staying with someone that's got all of these problems? Again, I would suggest yes, there is.
I'd agree. I think some people just want to be with someone they can try and fix, or they've got what I call the Superman complex, where they try and save people. And you can't do that because you're not taking on the parental role there. You're an equal. So I absolutely agree. Yeah. Let's talk about singles then, because singles, we both work with singles a lot. It's what we do primarily. So many singles are trying to find someone, looking for a new partner, and they keep making these bad choices, particularly on dating apps, and they're swiping away perfectly good people and rejecting them for silly reasons. What advice would you give someone who is looking, who might have an issue with making bad choices?
I think the ultimate thing is to get some help. I think
from us.
You need to understand what you're doing. Some people are so comfortable with doing it, they don't even think it's a problem. So they're just going to keep carrying on doing it regardless. But if you recognize that there is a pattern that you're following, that you keep finding yourself in the same situations, attracting the same type of people into your life, that you do let the good ones go, perhaps, and you keep ending up choosing the one that is not very good for you. I wrote an article a while ago. It's called "When Your Gut Instinct Misleads You." Because of these subconscious messages that we carry, you can be instantly attracted to somebody and you think, well, this is it, this is love and everything else. But actually it's your subconscious relational style just saying, I recognize something in this person. I'm really attracted to that. And if you've got a kind of a maladaptive style of relating to people, generally it's your gut saying, this is exactly the type of person that we've always been with. Let's go for it. So it's not always the best thing to follow your gut. So I would suggest that you really need to check in with yourself. If you know you're doing it and you know it's a problem, to seek the professional and expert advice from somebody that can help you through it. If you don't recognize that you're doing it, you're just going to keep on doing it, and it's going to keep on happening until you reach that, what would you call, maybe a pain point. It needs to be a substantial recognition. I think in a lot of people, they need to go, like I did, that moment on the sofa where I thought, I am not doing this anymore, this is too much for me now. And that's when I realized I really wanted to change this. So a lot of people don't actually realize they want to or need to change this until they reach that kind of crisis point.
You're right. They reach that point and I can't go on the way this is going on. They want to find somebody and they're thinking, well, what do I do now? Where do I turn? What do I do? I think if you can't find an expert, ask a friend what you should do, and ask them to think, well, who should I really be meeting? Can you introduce me to somebody maybe who could be a good match for me? Because what we think that we want and what we really need are completely different things. And every matchmaker I talk to tells me that as well. Would you agree with that?
To a certain degree. I think most people that do that are always thinking about what they don't want. So what they say is, I don't want that type of relationship again. I don't want this person to treat me like that. But unfortunately, when we say things like that, we have a tendency to find exactly what we're looking for. And what we're looking for is to avoid certain things. But because we're looking to avoid certain things, we keep finding certain things. Yeah. It's like if I went over the park and I wanted to avoid treading in dog poo, the only thing I'm looking for is dog poo because I'm looking to avoid treading in it. Whereas what I need to be doing is just going over the park and taking in the world around me. And occasionally I might tread in a bit of dog poo, but I can see the rest of the world around me while I'm doing that. But we get so fixated a lot on thinking about what we don't want. That's all we ever find. So yes, I agree that we don't sometimes know what we really want because we don't think about it. But I think if we can think about what we want and put that into our mind and say, what I want is this from somebody, it triggers part of your brain called your reticular activating system, or your RAS, and that's your I'm going to find what you're looking for part of your brain. So if I say this is what I want from someone, your brain will go, okay, well, if that's what you want, I will try and help you to find that. And it brings it into your awareness so that your brain starts to look for these things for you. And then subconsciously, you'll start to attract different types of people into your life because your brain is looking for those different types of people.
I always say that look for green flags rather than red flags. So that does tie into what you said. People are always looking for reasons that things are going to go wrong. They're expecting people to dump them, to hurt them, to be unfaithful, because that's what's happened to them before in the past. Yeah. But I think look for what they're doing right. Expect things to go right, and they will, for the same reason you just said. Because always think about what could go right rather than what might go wrong. That is the way to get into any relationship and to embrace that. But I think we have to accept that nobody's perfect. We're all looking for different things. We all want different things. But relationships are just a journey together, and you have to make sure you're staying on the same path. What advice would you give somebody who is new into a relationship and generally wants to make sure this is going to go the distance? What advice would you give them?
I think that's an unknown, but I would suggest that actually a lot of the work I do is go be your authentic self. You know, be yourself. If you're with somebody and you are completely yourself, you know that person wants to be with you because of you. If you're trying to put on a mask, a facade, or pretend to be something else, that's the person that they actually are choosing to be with. And when you decide to let those barriers down and show your true self, they're not going to know what to do with you because they've got used to you being this facade. So what I would suggest, if you're in a new relationship with someone, it's really important that you are authentic and congruent, because then you know that the person is with you and that relationship is working because of your real self. You know, they're, like you said, it's about keeping an eye out for the green flags as rather than the red flags. If you see the red flags, then they need to be addressed. You know, don't feel that you can't address problems in your relationship even right at the beginning. But actually, if there are too many, then they're probably it's too much to work on, and it looks like it's going to be a hard slog, and you probably don't want to be there in the first place. So yeah, acknowledge the things that are working. Is this someone that you can see yourself being with for an amount of time? But I think most importantly is that you know who you are and you know what you want, and you are yourself within that relationship.
I ask all my coaching clients that. I say, what do you bring to the table? What makes you dateable, makes you special? And many people do struggle with that. They don't know the answer. So how can you really be your authentic self if you don't know yourself, if you're not open and making yourself vulnerable? What advice would you give someone?
Again, I think there's a lot of self-introspection that needs to go on. There are going to be barriers to you acknowledging yourself and the things that you can bring to the table. And that will be something, again, you've probably been doing all of your life since you were a child, because you were probably told that it wasn't good to show these parts of yourself, or you never had a voice, or you were told to do this, and your relationships are quite controlling perhaps, and you never felt you could be yourself. And you will grow up then not knowing what your authentic self is. So it's really kind of looking in the mirror and saying, okay, who am I? What are my good points? How do I accept who I am? I remember when I was in my mid-20s, I went on holiday with my friends and I won this raffle, and I had to get up on stage to collect this prize, and the guy said, "What's your name?" And I felt so embarrassed. And I thought it was because I'd had a few drinks and I was standing on stage in sort of front of 300 people or so. But it wasn't. It's because I didn't accept who I was. Just saying my name made me feel very uncomfortable because I just didn't accept the person that I was. I had no acceptance of me at all as a person. And that will then lead me to kind of go into the wrong types of relationships, but never recognize what I can bring to the table because I couldn't see anything good about me at all. So there is a lot of self-reflection to go on. It's about exploring and again working on them beliefs that you've got about yourself. So my core belief was that I was never going to amount to anything, and every limiting belief then that I created around that was all based on the same thing, that I couldn't really have what I want because I wasn't ever going to be good enough for anybody, because I didn't feel good enough for myself. And to understand that was kind of the thing that really changed my life. So I would suggest that being able to understand how you see yourself, whether you accept yourself or not, how much sort of self-care you have, self-acceptance you have, and then you'll be able to kind of acknowledge that for yourself, and then you'll bring somebody into your life that will complement that and see you in the same way.
I think it's terrible. So many people do go into life believing they're not going to amount to anything and they're not good enough. And this could be something maybe a teacher's told us at school, or a family member or a friend that when you're young, and it just haunts us forever. And some people will fight it and they will go on to prove that person wrong. But most people just take these burdens with us and they carry them through life, and it's horrendous. I've got 2 small kids, and I'm always wondering about how to be a better dad to make sure that they have a secure attachment style. They go through life with more confidence. And how would you advise me to empower them? What advice could you give?
Yeah, I think if you come from a secure attachment, then you've got a pretty good idea about how to create a secure attachment. I think it's the people that don't have that, and they carry their, as I said with my own parents, they carried their issues into the relationship and then into relationship with their children. But it is about being caring, nurturing, encouraging, loving, offering them the support that they need and allowing them to be themselves. I think, again, you're told not to do this and not to do that a lot as a kid. Behave yourself, be a good boy, be a good girl, whatever it might be. Don't do this, don't cry, whatever it's about encouraging that person to be, that child to be their real self, and let them be a kid as well. We do expect, have a lot of expectations of our children. And if we place our own expectations on them, we're not allowing them to be themselves. So I know obviously there needs to be some boundaries in place, because we all know that kids love boundaries. They can't function without them. But it's about saying, okay, who is this child? Let me see who this child is. Let me bring out the best in this child. And then they'll grow up feeling very secure and happy about themselves, and knowing that they can do the best that they can do, whatever they put their mind to. And I would suggest that's the best way to be around your children. And if you've got issues, you need to work on your issues, obviously, but suspend your own issues. Don't try not to bring those issues into the relationship with your kids.
I think that's such great advice there. I love the fact you said about being caring and nurturing and kind. And that's what the world needs more for everybody right now. We all need to be kinder to each other, and we all need to be more nurturing and trying to empower people and say nice things. Don't say things just to annoy people or to upset them. Go out there, find love, embrace them, and have adventures. And I think you're soon going to find a lovely partner. John, thank you so much. That was me rounding up there at the end of the podcast. I wanted to keep asking you questions, but I thought we've reached the time now, and I really appreciate that your time is valuable. So thank you, John, for coming on here. That's been fantastic.
No, you're very welcome, James. Thanks for having me. It's been lovely to be here.
Wonderful. Now, if somebody wants to find you and wants to know more about what you do, your documentary or your book, how would they find you?
It's all on my website. So if you go to www.johnkennycoaching.com, there's, in the resources part, you can click on to find more details about the book and also the documentary. I'm all over social media, so at John Kenny Coaching, and you'll find me somewhere.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, John. Have a great day, and I'm sure I'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, James. You too. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to give you a free copy of my latest book, which you can download right now from my website, jamespriest.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could share the love by taking a few seconds to write a positive review on the iTunes store right now. See you next time.